Sir, you are holding $50,000 in cash, and your daughter's medicine was declined 10 minutes ago. The security guard said it loudly enough for everyone in the narrow hospital lobby to turn. Ethan Whitaker stood under the pale fluorescent lights of St. Mercy Medical Center with rainwater dripping from the edge of his old brown jacket. One hand wrapped around a black leather bag he had found beside a silver sport utility vehicle in the parking garage. His boots left dark half-moons on the polished floor. His face looked tired in the way only working fathers looked tired, not sleepy, but worn thin by bills, night shifts, and promises made to a little girl sleeping 3 floors above him. In his shirt pocket was a folded notice from the pharmacy. Lily Whitaker. Albuterol refill. Payment overdue. He had read it twice in the elevator before finding the bag, and for one terrible second in the parking garage, with thunder rolling over the city and nobody watching from what he could see, Ethan had opened that bag and seen enough money to fix everything. Rent, medicine, groceries, the leak above Lily's bedroom, the overdue hospital balance printed in red. $50,000 sat there in neat bank-wrapped stacks, quiet as temptation, heavy as a loaded prayer. Ethan had closed the bag so slowly his fingers shook, not because he wanted to steal it, because he wanted his child to breathe. Now he stood at the security desk, soaked through, holding the kind of money men like him were usually accused of wanting and rarely trusted to return. Where did you get it? Derek Malloy asked, leaning forward with a smile that already had a verdict inside it. He was the hospital operations manager, all polished shoes and pressed cuffs, with a radio clipped to his belt and suspicion resting comfortably in his eyes. Parking level 2, Ethan said, near the west elevator. And you just picked it up? Yes. And brought it here? Yes. Derek looked at the bag, then at Ethan's jacket, then at the small tear near his sleeve. That is convenient. Ethan did not answer right away. The lobby smelled like disinfectant, burnt coffee, and wet wool. Somewhere behind him, an automatic door side opened and closed, letting in the sound of rain tapping the concrete outside. He placed the bag on the counter with both hands, as if setting down something fragile. I found it, he said quietly. It is not mine. Derek gave a short laugh. Men do not walk in off the street with $50,000 unless there is a reason. Ethan lifted his eyes. They were gray, calm, and exhausted. There is a reason. Derek's smile sharpened. And what is that? Ethan swallowed, thinking of Lily asleep with a plastic oxygen tube near her cheek, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, still asking before surgery if he had eaten dinner. My daughter is upstairs, he said. Someday she is going to ask me what kind of man I was when things were hard. The guard stopped typing. A nurse at the coffee machine turned her head. Even Derek seemed to pause, though only for a breath. Ethan continued, his voice low but steady. I need to be able to answer her without looking away. On the 3rd floor, behind a wall of tinted glass near the private donor lounge, Claire Ashford stood completely still. She had come to St. Mercy under her mother's old last name, Bennett. No press, no assistant beside her, no gold nameplate announcing that her family foundation funded half the hospital wing. She had been reviewing security footage after a missing bag had triggered an internal alert, expecting to see theft, greed, another ugly little proof that people became honest only when cameras were pointed at them. Instead, she had watched a soaked single father find enough money to change his life, open it, freeze, close it, and walk straight inside. Claire's hand rested against the glass. Below her, Ethan Whitaker did not know she existed. He did not know the bag was hers. He did not know the money was tied to a private donation, or that its disappearance could ruin more than one career by morning. He only knew that his child needed medicine, and that the money in front of him belonged to someone else. Claire had sat across from senators, bankers, and men who spoke of integrity while hiding lawyers behind every sentence. But this man, in an old jacket with rain on his shoulders and fear in his pockets, had just done something no contract could force. Derek reached for the phone. We should probably call the police and sort out your story. Ethan nodded once. No anger. No panic. Just quiet dignity. Call whoever you need to call, he said. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. A message from the pediatric floor lit the cracked screen. Lily is awake and asking for you. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he did not move toward the elevator. He stayed beside the money that could have saved her, waiting to prove he had not stolen it. And from behind the glass above, Claire Ashford made a decision that would follow him all the way home. The security office at St. Mercy was not built to feel like a courtroom, but that night, under the buzzing white lights and the slow ticking of an old wall clock, it became one. Ethan Whitaker stood on one side of the metal desk with his wet jacket clinging to his shoulders, while Derek Malloy sat on the other side, turning the black leather bag toward himself with the careful satisfaction of a man who believed he had finally found someone beneath him to judge. Officer Grant Miller arrived 12 minutes later, rain still shining on the brim of his hat, his expression professional but tired. He looked at the bag, then at Ethan. "You found this in the garage?" "Yes, sir." "You opened it?" "Yes." "Why?" Ethan looked toward the hallway that led to the elevators. Somewhere above them, Lily was awake, maybe scared, maybe searching the doorway for the only face that made hospitals feel less cold. "Because it was heavy," he said. "I thought someone might have left a laptop or medicine inside. Then I saw the cash." Derek folded his arms. "And then you thought about keeping it." The room went quiet. A coffee machine in the corner clicked and hissed as if it had something to say but thought better of it. Ethan turned back slowly. "I thought about my daughter," he said. "That is not the same thing." Derek leaned back, pretending the answer amused him. Convenient words. Officer Miller took out a small notepad. "Mr. Whitaker, do you have identification?" Ethan reached into his pocket and handed over his worn driver license, a hospital visitor sticker stuck to the back from earlier that evening. Derek noticed the pharmacy notice folded beside it and plucked it from the counter before Ethan could stop him. His eyes scanned the red lettering. "Past due," he said, loud enough for the guard by the door to hear. "That explains the shaking hands." Ethan's face tightened, not with rage, with restraint. There is a kind of silence that comes from weakness, and another kind that comes from a man holding back every wounded word so his child will never inherit his bitterness. Ethan chose the second kind. "That paper is private," he said. "You brought $50,000 into my security office," Derek replied. "Privacy left when suspicion walked in with you." Officer Miller glanced at Derek, uncomfortable now. "Mr. Malloy, let me handle the questions." But Derek was already standing, already enjoying the shape of the moment. "What do you do for work, Ethan?" "Maintenance. Night shifts. Some heating and cooling repairs." "So not exactly a man used to handling large sums of money." "No." "Behind on medical bills?" "Yes." "Daughter sick upstairs?" Ethan's eyes moved to the phone in his hand. "Yes." Derek tapped the leather bag with 2 fingers. "And we are supposed to believe you found the answer to every problem in your life and marched it right back because of character." Ethan looked at him then, really looked at him, with a calm that made the insult seem smaller than the man who had spoken it. "No," he said. "You are not supposed to believe anything. You are supposed to check the cameras." For the first time, Derek's mouth closed. Officer Miller wrote that down. Behind the dark glass of the observation booth, Claire Ashford listened through the internal security feed, her breath shallow, her face unreadable. Vanessa Cole stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "He is either honest," Vanessa said softly, "or very smart." Claire did not look away from Ethan. Sometimes honesty looks like intelligence to people who have forgotten what it is. Down below, Derek recovered with a thin smile. "Fine. We will check the cameras. Until then, he stays." Ethan nodded, accepting. Another humiliation the way some men accept bad weather, not because it does not hurt, but because complaining will not stop the rain. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the pediatric nurse appeared across the cracked screen. "Lily is asking if you got lost." Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, his voice was quieter. "Officer, may I call my daughter? Just to tell her I am downstairs." Derek scoffed. "You can make calls after we know whether you are a thief." That was when the door opened. Claire stepped into the room in a plain navy coat, her hair damp from the rain, her face pale but composed. No diamonds, no entourage, no announcement. Just a woman whose presence changed the air before her name did. She looked at the bag, then at Ethan, then at Derek. "That will not be necessary," she said. Derek straightened. "Ma'am, this is an active security matter." Claire's eyes did not move from Ethan. "I know," she said. "The bag is mine." For one full second, nobody moved. Derek Malloy's hand hovered over the phone. Officer Miller looked from Claire to the black leather bag, then back again. Ethan Whitaker stood so still the rainwater on his jacket seemed louder than his breathing. Claire stepped closer, her shoes making almost no sound on the gray tile floor. "You are the owner?" Officer Miller asked. "Yes," Claire said. "My name is Claire Bennett." It was not a lie exactly, not the kind that breaks a law, only the kind rich people use when they want to walk through the world without every stranger measuring them by their bank account. Bennett had been her mother's maiden name, the name Claire used when she wanted silence more than service. Derek's face shifted quickly, suspicion becoming manners. "Miss Bennett, I apologize. We were just securing your property." Claire looked at Ethan. "Is that what this was?" The question landed softly, but it cut clean. Derek cleared his throat. "Given the amount of cash involved, we had to be careful." "Careful with the money," Claire said. "Or careful with the man who returned it?" The room went quiet again. Ethan lowered his eyes, not out of shame, but because he had learned long ago that being defended in public could hurt almost as much as being accused. It made people stare. It made them pity. It made a man feel like his dignity had become evidence on someone else's table. Claire reached for the bag, opened it, and checked the contents with careful fingers. The bank-wrapped stacks were still there. So were the sealed envelopes from the donor office, the private documents, the small silver pin her mother had carried for 20 years. Then Claire's hand stopped. Beneath the top envelope, where there should have been a blue folder marked Pediatric Relief Authorization, there was a different folder, thinner, cream-colored, with no hospital seal. Her eyes narrowed. Vanessa Cole, watching from the doorway now, noticed the change instantly. "Claire," she said, too quickly, forgetting the last name they were using. Ethan caught it. Derek caught it too, though he pretended not to. Claire slid the folder open just enough to see the first page. A contract. Her foundation's name. A forged approval line. A routing number she did not recognize. The kind of paper that could turn charity into scandal by morning if it landed in the wrong hands. Her face did not break, but something behind her eyes went cold. "Officer Miller," she said evenly, "I need this bag preserved exactly as it was found." Derek blinked. "Preserved? Miss Bennett, your money is back. We can close this." Claire did not look at him. "No, we cannot." Ethan felt the air change. It was subtle, like a storm shifting direction before the windows begin to shake. He had returned a lost bag. That was all. He had not known there were names inside it. Signatures, traps hidden under cash. He had not known that the thing he carried through the rain was not just someone's money, but someone's reputation. Officer Miller straightened. "Is something missing?" Claire closed the folder slowly. Something was added. Derek laughed once, too fast. People misplace paperwork all the time. Claire turned to him then, and the warmth left her voice. "Not this paperwork." Vanessa stepped beside her, professional now, alert. The original donor packet was sealed when it left the boardroom. Who had access? Officer Miller asked. Claire glanced at Derek, then at the camera mounted in the corner, then back to Ethan. "Apparently more people than I was told." Derek's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting someone here tampered with your property?" Claire placed one hand flat on the bag. "I am suggesting that if Mr. Whitaker had walked away with this bag, he would have been called a thief before sunrise. And if I had received it without checking, my foundation would have been called something worse." Ethan looked up. The words settled over him with a weight he had not expected. He had come downstairs thinking he was returning money. Now he understood that his choice had interrupted a plan he could not even see. His tired hands, his shaking fingers, his refusal to keep what was not his, had stood between a stranger and disgrace. Claire looked at him for a long moment. "You did not just return cash tonight," she said quietly. "You returned the truth before anyone knew it was missing." Ethan did not know how to answer that. His phone buzzed again, small and helpless in the room's heavy silence. "Lily is worried. Please come up when you can." Claire saw the message before he could turn the screen away. Her expression softened, and for the first time since she entered, the billionaire hidden behind the name Bennett looked less like power and more like a woman remembering what mattered. "Go to your daughter, Mr. Whitaker," she said. Derek started to object. "He is still part of this inquiry." Claire's eyes stayed on Ethan. "No," she said. "He is the reason there still is one." Ethan did not move right away. He looked at Claire Bennett, then at Officer Miller, then at Derek Malloy, whose face had gone tight in the corners. For a man who had been desperate to keep Ethan in the room, Derek now looked strangely eager for him to leave. Ethan noticed it, but he said nothing. Silence had carried him through harder rooms than this one. He picked up his phone, tucked the pharmacy notice back into his pocket, and nodded once. "Thank you," he said. Claire held his gaze. "Your daughter is waiting." That was all it took. The father in him stepped ahead of the tired man. Ethan turned and walked out of the security office, past the guard who no longer looked quite so certain, past the coffee machine still hissing in the corner, past the glass doors where rain streaked the night into silver lines. The elevator ride to the third floor felt longer than it was. Every number blinked above him like a small judgment. 1, 2, 3. When the doors opened, the pediatric hallway welcomed him with soft blue walls, cartoon fish painted near the nurse's station, and the clean, sharp smell of antiseptic wrapped around something sweeter, maybe apple juice, maybe the little cups of gelatin they gave children who had been brave too long. Lily was sitting up when he entered, her blonde hair tangled against the pillow, her stuffed rabbit pressed beneath her chin. The oxygen tube curved gently under her nose. She looked smaller in the hospital bed than she ever looked at home. "Daddy," she whispered. Ethan smiled before his heart could break. "Hey, Firefly. You got lost." "A little." "In the hospital?" "Hospitals are tricky." She studied him with the seriousness of an 8-year-old who had already learned adults soften the truth when they are afraid. "Were you sad?" Ethan sat beside her and took her hand. Her fingers were warm, but too thin. "No, sweetheart. Just held up." "By bad people?" The question struck him softly. Not because it was childish, but because it was almost right. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "By confused people." Lily frowned. "Mom used to say confused people can still be kind." Ethan swallowed. His late wife, Anna, had left behind phrases like little lanterns, and Lily always seemed to find them in the dark. She did say that. Lily looked toward his jacket. "You are wet." "It is raining." "Did you eat?" He almost laughed, because children who need protecting often try to protect first. "Not yet. You should eat my crackers. Those are hospital crackers. Very fancy." She smiled faintly, and the room warmed around it. Downstairs, Claire stood in the security office with the black leather bag on the table and a forged contract under her hand, but her mind had followed Ethan to the elevator. She had seen wealthy men tremble over losing status. She had seen powerful women panic over headlines. But she had never seen a poor father walk away from $50,000 and then apologize for taking too long to reach his child. Vanessa stepped close and lowered her voice. "We should call legal." "We will." "And internal audit." "Yes." "And we should not let him disappear." Claire looked through the open door toward the hallway where Ethan had gone. "He is not disappearing." Vanessa understood the tone. "Claire, following him home is not a good idea." Neither was judging him from behind glass. Officer Miller cleared his throat. "Miss Bennett, I will need a formal statement." Claire turned back, composed again. "You will have it. Preserve the footage from the parking garage, the lobby, and this room. All of it." Derek shifted. "That may take time. Some cameras overwrite automatically." Claire looked at him, then stopped them before they do. His smile flickered. "Of course." But Claire had spent her life around men who smiled while hiding knives made of paperwork. Derek's smile had the same shape. 20 minutes later, after Ethan signed a brief witness statement and returned upstairs once more to kiss Lily goodnight, he left St. Mercy through the side exit with his collar turned against the rain. His old pickup sat useless in the parking lot, hood damp, battery dead again. He tried the ignition once. Nothing. Twice. Only a tired click. Ethan rested his forehead against the steering wheel, then got out, locked the door, and began walking. From a black sedan near the visitor entrance, Claire watched him pass under the yellow parking lights. Vanessa sat beside her, uneasy. "He is walking?" Claire did not answer. Ethan crossed the hospital drive with his hands in his pockets, shoulders bent against the wind, moving through the rain like a man used to making it home without rescue. Claire's voice came quietly. "Follow him." Vanessa glanced at her. From a distance? Claire looked at the man disappearing down the sidewalk, the man who had returned a fortune and still had no ride home. "Yes," she said, from far enough not to steal his dignity. The sedan moved slowly along the rain-slicked streets of East Harbor, never close enough for Ethan to notice, never far enough for Claire to lose sight of him. He walked nearly 2 miles beneath broken streetlights and dark storefront awnings, his old work boots splashing through shallow puddles, his shoulders curved not in defeat, but in endurance. Every few blocks, he checked his phone, probably waiting for another message from the hospital, probably counting how long before morning would ask more from him than night had taken. Vanessa kept both hands on the wheel, her eyes shifting between the road and the man ahead. "This feels wrong," she said. Claire sat in the back seat, silent for a moment, watching Ethan stop outside a small 24-hour pharmacy with a flickering sign. "So did what happened in that security room. We could help him properly. We do not know what properly means to him yet." Ethan stepped inside the pharmacy, and through the bright glass windows Claire watched him stand at the counter with the posture of a man trying to make a small problem sound smaller than it was. The pharmacist shook his head gently. Ethan pulled out his wallet. 3 bills. Some coins. A receipt folded so many times it had become soft at the edges. He counted once, then again. Not enough. The pharmacist slid one small inhaler across the counter anyway, speaking quietly, perhaps offering a partial refill, perhaps offering mercy in a white paper bag. Ethan nodded with both hands on the counter, the way men nod when gratitude is too large to carry in public. Then he moved to the back aisle. He picked up a small carton of milk, checked the price, put it back, took a smaller one. He chose day-old bread from a discount rack, a can of chicken noodle soup, and a single bruised apple. At the register, he hesitated over the apple. Claire watched his thumb move across the coins in his palm. 1 quarter, 2 dimes, a nickel. He put the apple back. Something in her chest tightened. This was the man who had returned $50,000 less than an hour ago. This was the man Derek Malloy had treated like temptation in a wet jacket. This was the man whose child was lying in a hospital bed, and still he could not bring himself to keep $1 that did not belong to him. Vanessa's voice softened. "Claire, I see it." "No, you do not." Vanessa looked at her through the mirror. "You see an honest man. I see a man who may not survive being honest in a world that rewards people like Derek." Claire turned her face toward the window. Outside, Ethan came out carrying the white pharmacy bag under his jacket to keep it dry. He did not see the sedan. He did not see the billionaire watching from behind tinted glass. He only saw the sidewalk, the rain, and the road home. His neighborhood sat behind the old rail yard, where chain-link fences leaned tiredly and the houses looked as if they had been holding their breath for years. Ethan stopped at a narrow duplex with peeling blue paint and a porch light that flickered like a tired candle. He unlocked the door carefully, as though noise itself cost money. Claire asked Vanessa to park across the street beneath a maple tree stripped bare by late autumn. Through the front window, warm yellow light spilled into the rain. Ethan moved inside the little house, and for the first time that night, Claire saw not a suspect, not a witness, not a man attached to her missing bag, but a father returning to a world held together by tape, prayer, and routine. The living room was small. A blanket covered part of the ceiling where water had stained the plaster. A portable heater sat near the couch, but Ethan unplugged it after checking the outlet, probably afraid of the bill, maybe afraid of the wiring. He placed the soup in a cabinet that had too much empty space. Then he opened the pharmacy bag and set the inhaler on the table with the kind of care another man might give to diamonds. On the refrigerator were crayon drawings, hospital appointment cards, and a faded photograph of a smiling woman with her arms around Ethan and a much younger Lily. Ethan stood before that photograph for a long breath. He touched 2 fingers to it, then lowered his hand before grief could make a sound. Claire looked away, not because she wanted to stop watching, but because the room had become too sacred for strangers. "His wife?" Vanessa asked quietly. Claire nodded, though she did not truly know. Some truths did not need paperwork. Inside, Ethan took off his wet jacket, folded it over a chair, and sat at the kitchen table. He spread out 3 bills beneath the light. Hospital balance, rent notice, utility warning. His head lowered, his hands clasped together, and for several seconds he was perfectly still. He did not curse. He did not complain. He did not pound the table or ask why the world had taken so much and offered so little. He simply sat there, carrying the weight without asking the room to admire him for it. Claire's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. She had built towers, funded wings, signed checks large enough to make newspapers write gentle things about her family. Yet across the street, in a house with a leaking ceiling and 1 can of soup in the cabinet, Ethan Whitaker had shown her a kind of wealth she had never been able to buy. Then his phone lit up. A message from the hospital glowed on the table. "Lily is sleeping better now." Ethan picked it up, smiled faintly, and whispered to the empty kitchen, Good girl. Claire heard nothing through the glass, but somehow she understood. Vanessa started the engine. Now what? Claire kept looking at the little house, at the old jacket, at the bills, at the dignity no rain could wash off him. Now, she said, we find out whether he can accept help without feeling bought. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the city still looked rinsed and gray, as if the night had left a bruise across every window. Ethan Whitaker woke before sunrise in the chair by his kitchen table, one arm folded under his head, the hospital bills still spread beneath his cheek. For a few seconds, he did not know where he was. Then the ache in his back, the smell of cold soup, and the sight of Lily's crayon drawings on the refrigerator brought the world back into place. He stood, made instant coffee with water that took too long to heat, and checked his phone. No missed calls from the hospital. That was mercy enough for one morning. At 7:15, he walked back towards St. Mercy with the small inhaler tucked carefully in his jacket pocket, but he never made it past his front steps. There on the worn wooden porch sat a plain white envelope weighted down by a smooth river stone. No stamp, no address, just 3 words written in careful blue ink. For your daughter. Ethan stared at it. The neighborhood was quiet except for a distant train horn and the soft hiss of tires on damp pavement. Across the street, behind the windshield of a parked sedan, Claire Ashford sat perfectly still. Vanessa Cole sat beside her, coffee untouched, eyes narrowed with worry. He is going to be offended, Vanessa said. Claire did not answer. Ethan crouched, picked up the envelope, and opened it with the caution of a man who had learned that gifts often came with hooks. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000. No signature, no explanation, just money. Enough for Lily's medicine, enough for the rent, enough to keep the lights on and stop the phone calls that came with polite voices and sharp consequences. Ethan held the check for a long moment. His hand did not shake this time. That frightened Claire more than if it had. He looked toward the street, not directly at the sedan, but close enough that Vanessa lowered her eyes out of instinct. Then Ethan stepped back inside. Now what? Vanessa whispered. Claire watched the front door close. Now we see who he is when help finds him in private. Inside the little kitchen, Ethan placed the check beside the bills. The numbers lined up like an answered prayer. $10,000. Past due balance. Medication refill. Rent warning. Utility notice. For one quiet minute, everything in his life seemed to lean toward yes. He could take it. No one had to know. No one would blame him if they did. A father with a sick child could call it grace and sleep with a cleaner conscience than most rich men carried into boardrooms. Then his eyes lifted to the photograph on the refrigerator. Anna smiling in the summer light, Lily on her hip, Ethan standing behind them with younger shoulders and fewer ghosts. He could almost hear his wife's voice, gentle but firm. Love does not make wrong things right. It gives you courage to do right things when they hurt. Ethan folded the check back into the envelope. He wrote one sentence on a scrap of paper, tucked it inside, put on his damp jacket, and walked out. Claire's breath caught. Vanessa started the car without being asked. Ethan did not go to the bank. He did not go to the pharmacy. He did not go to the landlord's office or the hospital billing department. He walked straight to St. Mercy and entered through the charity wing, where a small sign near the front desk read Pediatric Relief Fund. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. Can I help you, sir? Ethan placed the envelope on the counter. Someone left this at my house. For you, for my daughter. Then why are you bringing it here? He looked down the hallway, where children's drawings covered a corkboard, bright suns and crooked houses and stick figure families holding hands under impossible rainbows. His voice stayed quiet. Because if someone wants to help a child, there are children here whose parents do not have anyone leaving envelopes on porches. The receptionist opened the envelope and froze when she saw the amount. Sir, this is $10,000. Yes, ma'am. Do you want a receipt? Ethan hesitated. Then he took the scrap of paper back out, turned it over, and wrote a name on it. Not his. Not Lily's. Just 4 words. For a child alone. From across the lobby, half hidden near the donor wall, Claire watched the receptionist accept the envelope. Her face lost all its practiced control. The man she had tried to help had not rejected mercy. He had redirected it. He had taken money placed at his feet and lifted it towards someone even lower. Vanessa looked at Claire, and for once, she had no warning, no strategy, no clever doubt. He gave it away, she whispered. Claire nodded, but the motion barely held. "No," she said softly. He proved it was never about money. At that moment, Derek Malloy stepped out of a nearby administrative hallway and saw Ethan at the charity desk. His eyes moved from the envelope to Claire standing in the distance, and something sharp passed across his face. It was not surprise. It was calculation. Ethan had returned $50,000. He had refused $10,000 more. And for a man like Derek, that kind of honesty was not inspiring. It was dangerous. By noon, the story had already changed shape. It did not travel through St. Mercy as truth. Truth rarely moved that fast. It traveled as a whisper at the nurse's station, a comment near the vending machines, a raised eyebrow in the elevator. Ethan Whitaker found a bag of money. Ethan Whitaker was questioned by police. Ethan Whitaker only returned it because cameras were watching. By 1:30, someone had added that he had followed a donor into the parking garage. By 2 o'clock, someone else claimed he had been fired from another hospital years ago, though no such thing had ever happened. Derek Malloy did not need to shout. Men like him understood that a rumor only needed a small push to roll downhill. He stood in the administrative corridor with his tablet in one hand and a concerned expression on his face, speaking softly to people who trusted soft voices too much. "We have to protect the hospital," he said. "Of course, the man has a sick child, and that makes it delicate." Delicate. That was the word he used when he wanted cruelty to sound professional. Ethan heard the first version of it while waiting outside Lily's room with a paper cup of coffee he could not afford but had bought anyway because he needed something warm in his hands. 2 orderlies stopped talking when he passed. A nurse who had smiled at him yesterday looked down at her chart. Near the family lounge, a man in a gray suit glanced at Ethan's old jacket and pulled his briefcase closer. Ethan understood before anyone said it to his face. He had lived long enough to recognize the weather of judgment. It came quietly at first. Averted eyes. Short answers. Doors closing a little sooner than they needed to. He went into Lily's room and found her sitting up, coloring a picture of a house with a yellow porch light and 3 people standing beneath it. "Daddy," she said, not looking up. "A lady in the hallway said you took something." Ethan froze. The small room hummed with machines, soft beeps rising and falling like a tired lullaby. Sunlight pushed through the blinds in thin white stripes across Lily's blanket. He sat beside her carefully, as if the wrong movement might break more. Then the silence. "What did she say?" "She said maybe you were in trouble because of money." Lily's crayon stopped moving. "Are we bad because we do not have enough?" Ethan closed his eyes for half a breath. There were questions a father should never have to answer beside a hospital bed. He took the crayon from her hand, placed it gently on the tray, and held her fingers between his palms. "No, Firefly. Being poor does not make a person bad. Then why do people look at us like it does?" Ethan looked toward the window. Outside, beyond the hospital glass, the city moved on without caring who was tired, who was sick, who had been honest and still accused. His voice came low and steady. "Because some people confuse money with worth. But money only tells what someone has. It does not tell who someone is." Lily nodded slowly, trying to be older than 8. "Did you do the right thing?" "Yes." "Then I believe you." That nearly broke him. Not loudly. Ethan was not the kind of man who shattered in public. But his thumb brushed over her small knuckles, and for a moment his face bent under the weight of being trusted by the one person he most feared disappointing. Downstairs, Claire Ashford stood inside a private conference room with Vanessa Cole, Officer Miller, and 2 hospital board members who had suddenly become nervous in the presence of her real last name. On the wall screen, frozen security footage showed Ethan in the parking garage holding the black leather bag under the harsh yellow lights. Vanessa placed a printed report on the table. The forged contract was inserted after the donor packet left the boardroom. Access logs point to administrative clearance. Officer Miller looked up. "Whose clearance?" The room seemed to shrink. Claire did not blink. "Derek Malloy's." One board member exhaled sharply. "That is a serious accusation." Claire turned toward him with the calm of a woman who had spent years being underestimated by men who mistook grace for weakness. "No," she said. "It is a serious fact." Before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened and Derek stepped in without knocking, wearing that same polished concern. "Miss Ashford, I was hoping to speak with you before the donor event tonight." He stopped when he saw the screen. Ethan's image glowed behind him, soaked, tired, honest, and framed like evidence. Claire watched Derek's face flicker once. Only once. But once was enough. Good, she said. Because tonight, everyone will hear the truth. Derek smiled thinly. About him. Claire looked past him toward the pediatric wing, where Ethan's daughter believed in her father more cleanly than the whole hospital had. No, she said. About all of us. The donor event began at 7 o'clock beneath crystal lights that made the St. Mercy atrium look cleaner, kinder, and more expensive than it had any right to feel. White tablecloths covered rented banquet tables. Silver trays moved through the crowd with tiny food most families upstairs would never recognize. Men in tailored suits shook hands beside banners that read compassion, service, and community, while on the pediatric floor, Lily Whitaker slept with a plastic rabbit tucked under her arm and a belief in her father tucked even deeper. Ethan stood near the back wall in the same old jacket, because a nurse had told him Claire wanted him downstairs for a few minutes. He did not want to be there. He did not belong among donors discussing generosity over sparkling water. He belonged beside Lily, or under a broken heater, or walking home through rain with his hands in his pockets. Derek Malloy saw him and smiled. Mr. Whitaker, he said, crossing the polished floor with a glass in hand. Brave of you to come. Ethan looked at him calmly. I was asked to be here. Of course. Derek leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the insult private. Some men find money once and spend the rest of their lives standing near it. Ethan did not answer. That bothered Derek more than anger would have. Across the atrium, Vanessa Cole stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. The gentle clink of glasses faded. Conversations softened. Then Claire Ashford walked up beside her, no longer Claire Bennett in a plain coat, no longer a quiet woman behind tinted glass. She wore a simple black dress and a silver pin shaped like a small wing, the emblem of the Ashford Foundation. The room recognized her before she spoke. Shoulders straightened. Smiles became careful. Derek's glass lowered slightly. Claire looked over the crowd, then toward the back wall where Ethan stood half in shadow. Last night, she said, a black leather bag belonging to my foundation was left in the parking garage. A small murmur moved through the room. Derek's face remained polite, but his eyes sharpened. Claire continued. Inside that bag was $50,000 in cash intended for emergency pediatric relief. Ethan lowered his gaze, already feeling the room turn toward him. Also inside, Claire said, was a forged document designed to make my foundation appear responsible for funds we never approved and accounts we never created. The room changed. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was the sound of important people realizing the evening had become dangerous. Derek stepped forward slightly. Miss Ashford, he called, smooth as glass. Perhaps this is better handled privately. Claire looked at him. Dishonesty grows best in private, Mr. Malloy. The silence that followed had weight. Vanessa clicked a remote. The large screen behind Claire lit up with security footage from the parking garage. Ethan appeared under yellow lights, soaked from the rain, picking up the bag. The room watched him open it, watched him freeze, watched him pull out his phone, see the pharmacy notice, and stand there with $50,000 in his hands while the world offered him every excuse to fail. Then the footage showed him closing the bag and walking straight toward the hospital entrance. No hesitation, no hiding, no theft. Only a tired father choosing truth when nobody in that garage was close enough to praise him for it. Claire's voice softened, but it carried farther than before. This man's daughter was upstairs waiting for medicine. His bills were overdue. His truck would not start. He had every human reason to make the wrong choice, and still, he made the right one. Nobody moved. Ethan felt heat rise behind his eyes, not from pride, but from the strange pain of being seen too clearly. Then Claire clicked to the next. File. Access logs. Timestamps. Internal camera stills. A staff badge. Derek's badge. Officer Grant Miller stepped from the side of the atrium with 2 hospital compliance officers beside him. No shouting. No spectacle. Just the quiet arrival of consequences. Derek's face drained of its polish. This is absurd, he said. You cannot possibly think I would risk my career over a paperwork error. Claire held his gaze. You did not risk it over paperwork. You risked it because you thought a poor man would be easier to blame than a rich one would be to question. The words landed, and the whole atrium went still. Derek looked around for allies. But power has a way of evaporating when truth enters the room with receipts. Officer Miller spoke gently but firmly. "Mr. Malloy, we need you to come with us and answer some questions." Derek's mouth opened, but no defense came out that could survive the screen behind him. As he was led away, Ethan did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply watched with the same quiet dignity he had carried in the security office, the same restraint that had kept him from becoming what other people accused him of being. Then a small voice came from the side entrance. "Daddy." Ethan turned. Lily stood there in a soft blue hospital robe, holding a nurse's hand, her hair brushed but still wild at the edges from sleep. The nurse looked apologetic, but Claire gave a tiny nod, as if this was exactly where the child belonged. Lily walked toward her father, slow but determined. The crowd parted for her without being asked. She reached Ethan, took his old wet-sleeved jacket from his arm, and held it against her chest like it was a flag. Then she looked at the people in their suits, the donors, the board members, the ones who had whispered, doubted, and judged. Her voice was small, but it crossed the room cleanly. "My daddy is not poor," she said. "He just does not keep what is not his." No one clapped at first. The truth was too holy for noise. It settled over the atrium like a prayer, humbling every polished shoe, every expensive watch, every careful smile. Claire looked down, tears finally breaking free. Ethan knelt and pulled Lily gently into his arms. And only then, slowly, one person began to clap. Then another. Then the whole room rose into applause, not the bright applause of entertainment, but the deep, uneven applause of apology, respect, and redemption arriving late, but finally finding the right man. The applause did not make Ethan Whitaker feel taller. It made him feel responsible. He held Lily against him beneath the bright atrium lights while the room stood around them. And for the first time in a long time, nobody looked at his old jacket, his worn boots, or the tired lines around his eyes as evidence of failure. They looked at him as a man. That was all he had ever asked of the world, and somehow it felt like everything. Claire Ashford stepped down from the stage and stopped a few feet away, careful not to turn the moment into charity, careful not to crowd the dignity that had already survived enough. "Mr. Whitaker," she said softly, "I owe you an apology." Ethan shook his head. "You did not accuse me." "No," Claire said, "but I watched from a distance when I should have stood beside you sooner." Lily looked up at her. "Are you the lady who lost the money?" Claire smiled through tears. "Yes. My daddy gives things back." Claire nodded, and her voice grew tender. "I know he does." In the weeks that followed, St. Mercy changed in ways that did not fit neatly into a press release. The forged contract was investigated, the Pediatric Relief Fund was protected, and every employee who had whispered about Ethan learned that gossip can wound deeper than a shouted insult. Claire did not hand Ethan a giant check beneath a camera flash. She understood by then that money given without respect can feel like another kind of judgment. Instead, she invited him to her foundation office on a quiet Tuesday morning, where sunlight fell across a conference table and no one spoke to him, as if he were lucky to be there. She offered him a position as director of Honest Hands, a new community repair program for single parents, elderly neighbors, and families with sick children who needed safe heat, dry ceilings, working ramps, and homes that did not punish them for being poor. Ethan read the offer twice. "I am not a director," he said. Claire folded her hands. "You are a man who knows what a broken home feels like before a contractor writes an estimate. That is exactly who should lead it." He accepted, but only after making sure he would work for every dollar. That made Claire smile, because she had expected nothing less. Lily's treatments continued through the hospital relief program, not as a favor to Ethan, but because that was what the fund had always been meant to do. Slowly, color returned to her cheeks. She went back to school with a new backpack, the same stuffed rabbit, and a story she told only when someone asked why she believed so strongly in doing the right thing. "Because my daddy says truth may walk slow," she would say, "but it still gets there." 3 months later, the first Honest Hands home opened on the east side of the city. It belonged to a widowed mother with 2 boys and a furnace that had failed every winter for 4 years. Ethan stood on the porch in work gloves, watching volunteers carry lumber, paint, and boxes of food through the front door. Claire arrived near sunset, wearing jeans and a simple coat, not as a billionaire visiting a project, but as someone who had finally learned that grace felt better when it had dirt on its shoes. Lily ran ahead of her with a yellow paper flower she had made in art class. "Miss Claire," she said, "Daddy says we are having soup tonight if you want to come." Claire looked at Ethan. He stood by the porch railing, the evening light soft on his face, still quiet, still careful, still a man who would rather build something good than talk about being good. "Only if I am not intruding," Claire said. Ethan opened the gate. "You are not." That night, the little duplex with peeling blue paint glowed warmer than it ever had. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Soup simmered on the stove. Lily drew 3 people beneath a yellow porch light. And Claire sat at the kitchen table where hospital bills had once covered every inch of hope. No one spoke about the $50,000. They did not need to. Some miracles do not arrive as money. Some arrive as respect. Some arrive as a second chance. And some arrive quietly, wearing an old jacket, carrying nothing that is not theirs, teaching the world that dignity does not need to shout in order to be heard. If this story touched your heart, share in the comments what you would have said to Ethan that night in the hospital, or tell us about someone in your life who chose honesty when nobody was watching. Thank you for watching until the end of the video.